They say fate works in mysterious ways, but I never thought mine would come limping toward me in the form of an old man collapsing on the sidewalk, while I was just rushing to work like every other normal day. I didn't know then that helping him up would change everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, and myself. Because that man, frail, trembling, with cloudy eyes and blood on his lips, he wasn't just a stranger. He was my father, the one my mother swore had died 20 years ago. And this is the story of how one moment of kindness uncovered a lifetime of secrets. It started on a Monday, the kind of Monday that already feels like a punch to the face. My alarm didn't go off. I spilled coffee on my blouse. The subway was a furnace of human misery, and by the time I finally stepped out into the street, I was already 10 minutes late for a job interview I desperately needed. So when I saw the old man lying there on the pavement, surrounded by passersby who only glanced and walked on, I hesitated. Just for a second. I was late. He wasn't my responsibility, but something in the way his hand reached out, trembling, something in the way his eyes locked onto mine, as if he knew me. I couldn't walk away. I rushed over, dropped to my knees. His lips were dry and cracked, his breathing shallow. "Sir, can you hear me?" He whispered something, barely audible. I leaned in. "Don't call ambulance." I blinked. "But you need help. You've collapsed." "Just water." I ran into the nearest store, grabbed a bottle, and hurried back. As I tilted the water to his lips, his hand clutched mine tightly. I remember the way his fingers trembled, but there was strength too, a kind of desperation. It made me shiver. That was the first time I felt it. The weird, inexplicable pull. I helped him sit up slowly, offering to call his family. But he shook his head. "No family," he rasped. "No family." That should have been the end. I could have walked away, satisfied I'd done my good deed for the day. But I didn't. Something made me offer him a ride. And when he protested, I insisted. I told myself I was just being decent, but deep down, I already knew that something about this man wasn't right. Or maybe, it was too right. I took him to a small clinic not far from my apartment. Paid the bill out of pocket. Waited in silence as the nurse cleaned his wounds. I didn't even know his name. Until she asked. And he said it. My blood froze. Because I recognized it. It was the name I'd found, once, scribbled in the corner of a torn photo my mother always kept hidden at the back of a drawer. His name was the same as my father's. The father she told me had died before I could speak my first word. I couldn't breathe. It was like my chest had caved in. My hands went cold, and a ringing started in my ears. I stared at him, this old, worn-out man who looked nothing like the blurry photo I'd once held as a child, but somehow, now, he felt more familiar than any face I'd seen. I tried to steady my voice. What did you say your name was?" He looked at me with tired, puzzled eyes. "Why does it matter?" I swallowed hard. "Because that's my father's name." He blinked, then gave a weak, dry laugh. "Must be a coincidence. Girl, I don't have a daughter." But I couldn't stop staring. His nose, the shape of his eyes, there was something unmistakable. A mirror I didn't know I had been looking for all my life. "I'm sorry," I said, suddenly embarrassed, suddenly unsure. "I didn't mean to." "Forget it. Just rest." "Okay." I left the room for air, my mind spinning. Could it be him? Was it even possible? I called my mother. She didn't answer. I called again, then again. Finally, she picked up. "What is it?" "Honey, I'm at the salon." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did Dad really die?" There was a pause, the kind of pause that answers everything before a word is even spoken. "Why would you ask me that?" "Because I just found a man on the street who has his name. And his face. And I think he might be." "Stop." Her voice turned sharp, trembling. "Do not go near that man again." "Why not?" I asked, heart racing. "Is it true? Is he my father?" Another pause. Then, softer, almost a whisper. "I buried that man 20 years ago. If he's alive, he doesn't deserve you." She hung up. I stood there in the hallway of that small clinic, the fluorescent lights humming above me. And I realized, my life wasn't what I thought it was. My mother wasn't who I thought she was. And the man lying in that hospital bed might be the biggest lie of all. But I couldn't walk away now. I had to know the truth, even if it meant shattering the only version of my past I'd ever known. So I turned around, walked back into the room, and sat beside him. "I think you're my father," I said quietly. He didn't speak, he just looked at me. Then, his eyes filled with tears. He didn't cry, not the way people do in movies with sobs and shaking shoulders. His tears came silently, sliding down his cheeks like they'd been waiting years for permission to fall. And in that moment, I didn't know what to feel. Pity, anger, relief. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either, just whispered, "What's your mother's name?" "Isabella." His eyes shut tight like the name physically hurt him. "So it's true," he muttered. "You're her daughter." "No," I said, barely breathing. "I'm your daughter." He let out a laugh, hoarse, bitter. "She said she'd never tell you. Swore she'd keep you away from me forever." "Why?" I asked, my voice rising, breaking. "Why would she do that? Why would she lie to me for 2 decades?" He looked at me for a long time. And in that moment, I could see it, beneath the wrinkles. Behind the weathered skin, the man in that photograph. My father. But the pain in his eyes, it wasn't just about my mother. "She thought she was protecting you," he said slowly. "Maybe she was." I shook my head. "From what?" "You." He didn't answer. "I grew up thinking you were dead," I continued, my throat tightening. "Do you know what that does to a kid? I mourned someone I never knew. I wrote letters to a grave that never existed. I lit candles every year on your death anniversary because she told me to." He turned away. "I never asked her to do that." "So what happened?" I demanded. "Why did you leave? Why did she erase you?" He took a long breath. Like the story had been living in his lungs for far too long. "I didn't leave," he said. "I was taken." My stomach dropped. "What? Isabella's father, your grandfather, he didn't want her marrying me. Said I wasn't good enough. Said a street kid with no family had no business touching his daughter." I froze. "He paid some men to take care of me," he said, his voice hollow. "They beat me, dumped me in another city, left me for dead. I spent months in a coma. When I woke up, she was gone. Moved, disappeared. I tried finding her, but it was like she vanished. When I finally tracked her down, she was already married to someone else. Pregnant. I thought it was his baby. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I had spent my life believing I was the child of a tragic death. But the truth was so much worse. I was the child of a stolen love story." He looked back at me then. His eyes, red and broken, held mine with such desperation it nearly tore me in half. "I didn't leave you, sweetheart," he whispered. "I never would have." I wanted to scream, to cry, to hug him and slap him at the same time. Instead, I asked, "What's your name?" He blinked. "I told you already." "No," I said, my voice trembling. "I want to hear it again. I want to hear my father's name. From his lips." He smiled, a sad, quiet smile. "My name is Thomas." And I nodded slowly, a tear slipping down my cheek. "I'm Emily." He whispered it back, "Emily." And just like that, the space between us, 20 years wide, began to close. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Neither of us knew what to say next. How do you catch up on a lifetime that never happened? I studied his face, the deep lines that life had carved into him, the slight tremble in his fingers. And I wondered, where had he been all these years? Alone, homeless, wounded? Did he watch other fathers play with their daughters and wonder what I might have looked like? What kind of person I became? I broke the silence first. "Where do you live?" He laughed, but it wasn't amused, it was hollow. "Shelter to shelter, park benches. Mostly, I was doing okay. You know, working at a garage for a while. But when COVID hit, the place closed down. It's been rough since." My chest tightened. "Why didn't you reach out to us?" "To her?" His eyes turned distant. "I did, once. Years ago. Sent her a letter. Never got a reply. I figured she wanted me gone for good. And after everything your grandfather did." "Maybe she did." I clenched my fists. The thought of my mother, keeping a man like this out of my life felt like a betrayal I wasn't ready to face. But it also explained so much. Why she avoided talking about the past. Why she cried alone on my birthdays when she thought I wasn't watching. Why there was always a strange, haunted look in her eyes when I asked about my father. I stood up. "I'm not leaving you here." He blinked. "Emily, no, don't argue with me. I don't care what happened. You're coming home with me." His mouth opened, but no words came. He just nodded. That night, I brought him back to my apartment. I gave him the guest room. A warm shower, Clean clothes that belonged to an ex. I made his tea, though my hands shook so badly I spilled the water. He didn't judge, just watched me, like he couldn't believe I was real. After dinner, he sat across from me on the couch and asked the question I'd been dreading. Does your mother know? I hesitated. No. Are you going to tell her? I don't know. He nodded, as if he understood too well what that meant. She might hate me, I whispered. She might. He agreed softly, but she might also be carrying more guilt than you'll ever know. I stared into my cup. I don't know what's real anymore. He reached across the table, placing his hand gently over mine. This, he said, this is real. And in that moment, I knew I didn't need all the answers. Not yet. I just needed this second chance. Even if it had taken 20 years to find it. The next morning, I called in sick to work, something I never did. I needed time. Time to breathe. Time to think. Time to process the fact that the man currently sipping tea in my kitchen had once held me as a baby, and then vanished from my life. Not by choice, but by betrayal. I watched him from the hallway. He looked so out of place, like a ghost trying to exist in the world of the living. He cleaned the mug twice after finishing, folded the dish towel perfectly. The kind of man who didn't take kindness for granted, who didn't believe he deserved it. And then my phone rang. Mom. My heart jumped into my throat. I didn't answer, but the guilt set in almost immediately. I couldn't keep this a secret. Not for long. So, I did what I had to. I texted her. We need to talk. It's important. Face to face. She replied almost instantly. Come over. I'm home. I didn't tell Thomas. I just said I needed to run an errand. Made him promise to stay inside and rest. He nodded, trusting me too easily. My hands were ice cold by the time I reached her door. She opened it with a nervous smile. Emily, you scared me yesterday with that call. What was that about? I stepped inside without speaking. My chest felt like it was on fire. She watched me carefully, sensing something was wrong. I stared her straight in the eyes. You lied to me. Her face changed, slowly, like a mask being peeled off. About what? She asked. But her voice was already breaking. I swallowed hard. He's alive. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then took a step back. As if I'd physically hit her. Who? She whispered. You know who. My father, Thomas. I found him, on the street. He collapsed. I helped him. I didn't know who he was until he said his name and, God. Mom, why didn't you tell me? Her face went pale, lips trembling. For a long time, she said nothing, just gripped the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Then finally, she whispered, I thought he was dead. No, you wanted him to be. I snapped. You let me believe that. Tears filled her eyes, and when she spoke again, it was the sound of a woman unraveling. I was trying to protect you. From what? I shouted. From him. He loved you. He tried to find you. I know, she said, sobbing now. I know, but you don't understand. My father, your grandfather, he threatened to destroy him. He showed me photos, beatings, blood. He said if I ever reached out, he'd finish the job, and I believed him. I was scared. I stood there, breathing hard, every part of me screaming. I mourned him, Mom. Every year, I lit candles for a man who was breathing. I needed him. She sank into the chair, covering her face. I needed him too, she whispered. Silence fell between us, thick and crushing. Then I said, quietly, he's here, in my apartment, right now. She froze. I waited for a reaction, for her to scream, to cry, to run out the door. But all she did was nod, very slowly, and whisper, then I guess it's time I face him. That afternoon, the sky was overcast, grey clouds rolling over the city like a curtain about to fall on a long hidden truth. I held the apartment door handle for a few seconds longer than necessary. My mom standing silently behind me. She hadn't said a word the entire ride over. Not one, just clutched her purse tightly and stared out the window, like she was bracing for impact. When I finally opened the door, Thomas was standing by the window. He turned around slowly, and time stopped. His eyes widened the moment he saw her. Her breath hitched, and for a second, they just stood there, frozen, two people who had been torn apart by time. By fear, by other people's cruelty. He took one shaky step forward. Isabella, she covered her mouth with her hand. Tears instantly welled in her eyes. I thought you were dead, she whispered. I almost was, he said, his voice breaking. You disappeared. I had to, she sobbed. Your face, the bruises. Your blood was on my father's hands. I was pregnant and terrified. He told me if I ever tried to find you, you'd vanish for real next time. I believed him. I looked for you, he said, stepping closer. For years, you were gone, moved, married. I thought the baby wasn't mine. It was always yours, she choked out. Always. And with that, she collapsed into tears. He didn't hesitate, despite his weak frame, despite the pain that twisted in his limbs. Thomas reached out and caught her in his arms. They held each other for the first time in 20 years. Not as strangers, not as ghosts, but as the man and woman who once promised forever, and had it stolen from them. I stood there, tears silently rolling down my cheeks, watching the two people who created me, finally reunited. After a long, aching moment, my mother pulled back just enough to touch his face, tracing the scars time had carved there. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I should have fought harder. I should have never let them take you from me. He kissed her hand gently. We were young, scared. You did what you thought would keep our child safe. I can't blame you for that. They looked at me then, both of them, and for the first time in my life, I saw myself not as a girl with a fractured family, but as the living, breathing proof that love, no matter how broken, could still survive. I think we all lost something, I said quietly, but maybe, it's not too late to find pieces of it again. My mom nodded, eyes filled with quiet hope. Thomas reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together, and in that moment, I realized, this wasn't just a reunion. It was a beginning, a second chance not just for them, but for all of us. The days that followed were like walking through a dream I wasn't quite ready to wake from. Thomas stayed with me. My mom began visiting, at first awkwardly, cautiously, like stepping onto ice that might crack beneath her feet. But slowly, the silence between them softened. The way they looked at each other changed. Not quite lovers again, not yet, but something else, something more fragile, more real. For me, it was confusing. Some nights, I'd find Thomas asleep on the couch, a blanket half falling off him, his breathing steady, his face peaceful in a way that almost made me cry. Other nights, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how different my life might have been if he'd been there. Would I be braver, warmer, would I smile more often? One morning, I found him in the kitchen, trying to make pancakes. The pan was burning, and he looked up sheepishly. Turns out cooking's not like riding a bike, he said with a laugh. I smiled and showed him how I liked mine, lightly golden, crispy on the edges. He listened like it was sacred knowledge. And that's when I realized, he wasn't just trying to be in my life. He wanted to learn it. All of it. But just when things felt like they were healing, the past came clawing back. It started with a letter. No return address. Just one word on the front. Emily. Inside was a single sheet of paper. A name, an address, and a note written in block letters. Ask your grandfather what really happened. Before it's too late. I stared at it for a long time. My hands trembling. My grandfather, the man I hadn't seen since I was 16. The one who always gave me expensive gifts but never once looked me in the eye. My mother had cut him off years ago. Said it was better that way. But I had questions now, burning ones, and this was the spark. That evening, I confronted my mom. She went pale when she saw the letter. Where did you get this? She asked, snatching it from my hands. It came in the mail. No return address. Her fingers crumpled the paper slowly, and I watched the guilt rise in her eyes like a tide. Mom, I said, stepping forward, what did he do? Her voice was barely a whisper. He destroyed everything. He hated Thomas, said he'd rather see me dead than married to him. The day he found out I was pregnant, he turned cold. Ice cold. Told me I could keep the baby. But Thomas had to disappear. My stomach turned. Did he order what happened? She nodded. I begged him not to hurt him. I thought he just wanted to scare him. But then I saw the photos. He made sure I knew the price of disobedience. I was 18, Emily. I was terrified. I could barely breathe. So you left, and just let him suffer? I thought he was dead. She choked out. And your grandfather made it clear, if I tried to reach out, he'd come for both of us. So I married someone else. Changed my name, and I prayed you'd never ask. My heart ached, but now I'm asking, and I want the truth. From him. She stared at me for a long time. Then finally said, "Then go, but don't expect kindness." The next day, I went to the address on the paper. A massive estate just outside the city. Steel gates, marble pillars, exactly the kind of cold luxury I remembered. The butler recognized me instantly. "Miss Emily," he said, surprised. "Mr. Blackwood didn't say you were coming." "I didn't tell him," I replied, brushing past. And when I entered that familiar, suffocating study, filled with cigar smoke and silence, I found him there. My grandfather, older, grayer, still terrifying. He looked up slowly, unimpressed. "So," he said, "the prodigal child returns." I held up the letter. "Who sent this?" His eyes flicked to the page, and something unreadable passed over his face. "I did," he said simply. I didn't expect him to admit it. But he did, just like that. "I sent it." I stood frozen in the doorway, my hand tightening around the paper. "Why now?" I demanded. "Why tell me now, after everything, after lying to my mother, to me, after destroying someone's entire life?" He didn't flinch, just leaned back in his leather chair, as calm and cruel as ever. "Because you were never supposed to meet him," he said coldly. "You were supposed to grow up smart, successful, untouched by the filth that man came from. And yet, here you are, digging through graves." I walked forward slowly, the anger in my chest pulsing like a heartbeat. "He's not filth. He's my father, a father who slept in gutters." He scoffed. "Who fixed cars for spare change? Who couldn't protect you or your mother? And I should have let him die when I had the chance." I slapped the desk before I even knew what I was doing. He didn't flinch, just stared at me, like I was a child having a tantrum. "You think power makes you right?" I spat. "You think money justifies murder?" His voice was ice. "I didn't kill him." "No," I snapped. "You just paid others to do it. That's somehow better." Silence. And then he did something I never expected. He sighed. Not the sigh of guilt or sorrow, but exhaustion. Regret twisted into arrogance. "You'll understand one day, Emily," he said, "when you have something to protect. When love makes you stupid and fear makes you cruel." "I already have something to protect," I said, trembling. "I have a father who didn't abandon me, a mother who was broken by you, and a truth that doesn't need your permission anymore." I turned to leave, heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. But before I reached the door, he called out, "You go back to him now. But one day you'll see, blood doesn't change what people are. He's weak, and the world eats the weak." I turned back, just once. Maybe, but love doesn't, and I walked out. When I got back to the apartment, Thomas was in the kitchen, humming an old song, flipping through a book of baby names I didn't even know I owned. I stared at him, a man who had nothing, but gave everything, a man my mother mourned, my grandfather erased, and fate, somehow, returned to me. He looked up, smiling. "Hey, you okay?" I walked over and hugged him tightly, burying my face in his shoulder. "I am now," I whispered. The weeks that followed were like breathing fresh air after years underground. For the first time in my life, I had both my parents under the same roof. Not as a married couple, not as a perfect family, but as two people finally allowed to share the same truth. Thomas didn't ask for anything. No pity, no apologies, just time. And he used it well. He cooked with Mom, burnt more things than he got right. But they laughed through it. He fixed the creaky door in my hallway. He taught me how to check my car's oil, because you can't always trust the guys at the garage. Sweetheart. He told me stories from the life he'd lived while we thought he was gone, nights in shelters, random jobs, kind strangers who gave him dignity when the world had none. I listened. I soaked it in, because for the first time, I wasn't filling in a blank page, I was getting to read it. Mom changed too. She was softer, quieter, sometimes. I caught her watching him when he wasn't looking, her fingers twitching slightly like they were remembering how to reach for him. One night, I found her sitting alone on the balcony, staring out at the city lights. "I wasted so many years," she whispered, not realizing I was there. "You didn't know," I said gently. She shook her head. "I chose not to know." "That's worse." I sat beside her. "You're here now, so is he. That's what matters." She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Do you think he'll ever forgive me?" And I answered honestly, "He already has. But healing doesn't come without its shadows." Thomas got sick. Not the kind of sick you can shake off. The kind that creeps in silently. A little more each day. At first, it was just fatigue. Then, dizzy spells. Then a fall that sent him to the hospital. The diagnosis was slow growing but terminal. Stage 4 liver failure. The years on the streets, the malnutrition, the pain he never voiced, it had taken its toll. I broke when I heard it. Right there in the sterile hallway with the doctor still talking. Thomas didn't cry. He just looked at me, smiled that same tired, peaceful smile, and said, "I'm just glad I got to find you. That's all I ever wanted." Mom sat at his bedside that night, holding his hand the way she used to when they were young. I watched from the doorway as they whispered things I couldn't hear but could feel. Love never dies, it just waits. We brought him home. He didn't want to die in a hospital. Said he'd had enough of cold white walls. So we turned the guest room into a sanctuary, plants, music, warm blankets. Every night, Mom read to him. Every morning, I made his favorite oatmeal, even when he could barely eat it. The day he passed, he was smiling. He held both our hands and whispered, "You gave me everything I lost. And more." His last words were, "Thank you for letting me be your father." And then he was gone. At his funeral, there weren't many people, but I stood up anyway. And I spoke. I told the story, not the version we used to tell, but the truth, the brutal, beautiful, impossible truth of a man who lived on scraps and still gave love like he was made of gold. I said, he was not weak, he was the strongest man I ever knew. And he came back for us, even when the world gave him every reason not to. After the service, Mom and I sat on the steps of the chapel, the wind gently rustling through the trees. She took my hand. "Do you think he knows we loved him?" I smiled, through tears. He knew before we ever said it. That's why he came back. A year later, I visited his grave with a letter in my pocket. A letter he wrote me before he passed. One I hadn't had the courage to open, until now. I sat beside the headstone and read his words in the quiet morning light. "My sweet Emily, you were the best thing I ever made in this life. I'm sorry I wasn't there to watch you grow up, but I hope I made you proud in the time we had. You are strong, braver than your mother and I combined. Promise me one thing, never run from truth. Even when it hurts, it will always set you free. I love you, now, always, and in whatever comes after. Dad." I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, "I love you too." And as I stood to leave, I felt it, the breeze shifting gently across my skin, the warmth of the sun breaking through the clouds. A quiet kind of peace. The kind that only comes when the past is no longer a prison, but a story finally finished.